Today is the second episode of my Kitchen Basics cooking class, and we're going to be talking about cutting boards. There are different types of cutting boards out there. I don't need to tell you that. I'm just going to explain the few basic ones that are around. I'll be starting with the best cutting boards and then go down to the worst cutting boards. The undoubtedly best cutting boards are so-called end grain wood boards. I have a very nice one here. And what is end grain, you might ask yourself? Well, end grain is essentially what you see when you look at a cut-over tree and you can count the rings. That surface is called end grain because that's where the grain ends. So the grain is the fiber in the wood, and that's where it ends. You're looking onto that surface. The advantages of end grain wood cutting boards is they're the nicest to your knives. They will not dull your knife in any significant way. If you imagine my fingers are the grain, then your knife comes and cuts, but that can close up again because your knife doesn't really cut the grain, it just squeezes in between essentially. Of course, there's going to be wear and tear eventually. The downside to end grain wood cutting boards is the price. They're the priciest options out there. You can find good ones at $60, $70, $80, but if you really want the top of the line ones, yeah, you're looking at least 3 digits. Next best choice is an edge grain wood cutting board. I do not have one of those. On an edge grain wood cutting board, you're looking along the fiber. So if you look at this bamboo cutting board, bamboo is always edge grain because bamboo is very thin, so you can't really make an end grain out of it. The fiber goes along the board. So that means they are considerably easier to produce because when you imagine this, you have to glue all these little pieces together. Where on a board like this, you're gluing long slices together. It's much quicker and much easier to produce, and therefore those boards are considerably cheaper. The downside is they are a little bit less good to your knives, but still extremely good. So an edge grain wood cutting board is the second best choice. Now for the downside of wood cutting boards, you cannot put them in the dishwasher and they need a little TLC, so you need to oil them regularly. A lot of people will tell you bamboo boards are bad for your knives, and yes, they are to a degree, but they're not as bad as plastic boards and definitely not as bad as glass boards or something like that. The upside of a bamboo board is they are very affordable. So you can go into IKEA these days and get one for $15, $20 and it's a perfectly good cutting board. Essentially, bamboo cutting boards have the same ups and downs like a wood cutting board. No dishwasher, don't soak them, you need maintenance. Probably the most common in most households, plastic cutting boards. So these are commercial grade plastic cutting boards. They come smaller, they come bigger. The upside of plastic is it's very affordable. They're easy to maintain because you do not need to oil them. You can toss them in the dishwasher, although most manufacturers don't recommend that. Plastic still absorbs some water and will warp a little bit. Plastic cutting boards are the typical no-brainer that most people have in their households. The problem I am having with them is they shed plastic into your food. So the longer you cut, when you see this board hasn't been cut on this side. So this is nice and pristine. When you turn it around, you see the white where the knife went in. So eventually this is going to get worse and worse and worse. I think that's easier to see on the red one. Oh yes. See, there you can already see how this starts to wear. So all that is shedding more or less plastic into your food. Every time you cut, there's really tiny plastic particles that shed off the board and go into your food. That happens on a wood cutting board too, but you can digest wood where plastic is not necessarily a healthy option. From that perspective, I don't use plastic boards much anymore. The one thing I am using them for is anything contaminated, something like chicken, because I can toss these things into the dishwasher and have them sterilized. These are perfect for something contaminated, but do yourself a favor and switch them out often. They're cheap enough. The moment you start seeing stuff coming off the board, it's time to get a new one. Then we come to the stupid cutting boards, as I call them. That's glass, marble, granite, all these ultra hard, non-porous surfaces. People think that's a great surface. They will just ruin your knives in no time because they're way, way, way too hard. They are easy to clean though, because they're non-porous, so you can leave them in your sink for a week and nothing will happen. But then, you will have to sharpen your knives every other week. I don't know who came up with the idea that glass is a good cutting surface. The other downside that these hard, non-porous surfaces have, they're slippery. So the chance of cutting yourself while you're slicing and dicing are much higher than they are on a wooden board or a bamboo board or a plastic board. So do yourself a favor, do not get these hard surface boards. Use them as a serving platter. They're perfect. Now a quick word about size. We all know size matters, at least with cutting boards. This is about a 15 by 19. I like that size. Anything 12 to 15 inches on the longest dimension will serve you just fine. I like them a little bit bigger because that gives you more real estate to shove stuff around. Then of course there's the little cutting boards, like this one. Just so you see a dimension, this is huge. I call this my pizza or baking cutting board. I'm not cutting on it. I'm just baking on it, rolling out a pizza dough, something like that. Whenever you get a huge board like this, consider two things. You gotta wash them and you gotta store them. And normally you're gonna have a problem with a board that size if you can't store it anywhere, and you have a problem if it doesn't fit into your sink. So measure the sink first before you go shopping. Otherwise, you'll be sitting out in the garage in the utility sink and start cleaning that thing. And that means you're never going to use it. Size is okay and is desirable, but within reason. That was a quick rundown on the pros and cons of the different types of cutting boards. My recommendation, get a bamboo one. They're perfectly good. If you have a little bit better budget, go get a real wood cutting board. Whether it's an end grain or an edge grain, depends on your preferences and your budget. Thanks for sticking around for this episode. The next episode is going to be about cutting techniques. So we're going to put the knife to the board. If you think this series is for you, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss another episode. Thanks for watching. See you around.